For 40 years, I've walked the line between worlds and am well versed in death. But I want to have faith in humans. Give me something to believe in. Earth below me, sky above me, fire within me. Brought to you by UPRN Network. I'm Trish Mo, and this is The Missing Piece. Good evening, everyone. I don't know if you can see me. Okay, I can't see myself. So one moment. um, let me change my. There we go. Maybe. No, you still can't see me, but you can hear me. There we go. Good evening, everyone. I'm your host, Trish, and this is The Missing Piece. It is Monday, October 17th. And it is absolutely freezing in Kansas today for the first time. I think it's going to be that way everywhere. Um, so that's not. I do love the fall though. I love I love all the months actually. I love the winter months because um, I don't like the heat that much. So I came from the north, and redheads can't get overheated. We just get mean, I think. So um, tonight, I do want to talk about. Well, first of all, I want to thank Carnation for sponsoring the show, and um, I've been doing this for a year now. Um, I started a little over a year actually. I started on Chasing Prophecy last at the end of last September. So it has opened up an entirely new world for me and a new network of people and weirdos like myself. So it's been amazing, and I want to thank everyone for listening and watching and being patient with my, you know, technology mishaps and yeah, that's something I'm improving on. So, but tonight I want to talk about there have been so many movies and TV series and films and everything else made in not only made in Kansas, but set in Kansas because there is a lot of really weird stuff that goes on here. Um, and I'm sure, I mean, everybody probably in the entire world has heard of The Wizard of Oz. So that's obviously a very well-known one, as well as Superman and things like that. But there are some lesser known horror movies, and most of them, ironically, which is really scary actually, are based on true stories. And that's um that's really scary because because that means there's a lot of really terrible people that have come through here. But we are known, we're in the middle of the United States. We're literally in the geographical center of the United States. So um during the day, even before settlers from Europe came over and things like that, um with the native tribes, the Midwest often was a point of major battles because this is kind of where a lot of different tribes and things would come together, and it was there was a lot of territorial battles here. So there's that, along with it being kind of the midpoint to the west when settlers would start heading this way, like the Oregon Trail, um, Lewis and Clark's expeditions, things like that. Kansas would be kind of a midway point, and most of the time, people couldn't make it through the winter past Kansas because to our immediate west, we have Colorado, and once you get to Colorado, you have the Rockies. So it was probably nearly impossible to cross the Rockies or anywhere north of that even because Wisconsin, Wyoming, all of those northern states get absolutely horrible winters as far as the snow drifts and things like that would have been near impossible um, in something like a wagon. So that's probably why a lot of things happen here because they had no other choice. They literally pull off the road and stop here basically. Which reminds me of a story of my own journey coming west, I guess. When I came here, I think it was I'll say when I came back here. It wasn't the first time I came here. I came back here from Buffalo, and this was probably 2000. Gosh, it was probably 2009, maybe. No, no, would have been 2008. 2008. So it would have been the fall of 2008. Um, so man, 14 years ago, right? I think that's 14 years ago. Um, and I started heading west, and the weather was actually pretty nice in Buffalo. You know, it was exactly November, the beginning of November, and the weather was nice when I left Buffalo. I headed into a blizzard. I'm talking straight up, couldn't see before I got out of the state blizzard. Um, to the immediate west, through Ohio. I had to they started shutting down the highways and I had to stay at a hotel there. And then I got back on the road and I started heading this way again. And all of a sudden there were warnings on the radio that there were tornado warnings. And that was literally the next day. So the road closed again. The highways, everything closed down because there was a tornado coming. And here I am going. I was probably around Illinois at that point. Um, and Illinois is kind of a creepy place to get stuck in. No offense to anyone in Illinois. I'm just talking about out in the middle of nowhere, small towns. Actually, some of those places don't even have towns. It's like a gas station and a creepy no-tell motel on the side of the road. Those are the kinds of places that I was getting stuck at when the highway was closing, of course. So here I am going through Illinois after, there's like blizzard warnings. There I even went through some flood warnings in the other part of Ohio. Um, and then here I am the next day in the middle of a tornado warning and the highway, everything's shutting down again due to the storms, floods, everything, and I have to pull off the highway at I don't even know if it had a name. I don't recall if the place had a name. I remember that. And this being, this was November, first week of November, but they still had their jack-o'-lantern out on the front of the hotel, which um I guess for those of you and if you don't celebrate Halloween or Samhain, just a pumpkin, obviously, but this was a rotting pumpkin because um, it had been there since Halloween, I assume. But they had an empty pool that was like cracked and moldy and just had stuff growing in it, and tumbleweeds were rolling by. I'm not even making this up. There was an El Camino in the parking lot and a a camper truck, like not an RV, but the camper that you put on the back of a truck. And so there I am. And thank goodness I had already flown out here with my son and left him like the week prior. Um and I went back to get my car, my vehicle, and my dogs and stuff. And so thank God I had my dogs with me. I had a pit rot mix at the time who was the biggest baby, but he was probably like 145 pounds. And then I had a bird dog. And so I go to the front desk of this place and there's no, like, I mean, it's seriously set in like a 19, 72 horror film. Um, because that's how the decor was, which I'm not judging. I'm just saying nothing had been updated in this place. And I ring the bell, the for service. Even the gas station was already closed. It had closed down for the night. And so I ring the bell for service. Nobody comes. I mean, this is a sketchy ass place. Like this was probably one of out of all the things I've been through ever in my life. This was one of the scariest things I've ever encountered. And, and so finally something starts stirring in the back. I hear somebody coming. A man comes up to the desk and he's obviously been drinking a little too much. And and that's not the scary part. And so um he was kind of slurring his speech and stuff, and I asked for release. And I asked how much the deposit would be for the dogs, and or if there's an extra fee or anything, or even if they allowed dogs. I didn't, I had nowhere else to go. And so he said the dogs are fine. He's like, no problem. But so he goes to reach for a key, and there were only like three hanging on the wall for that matter. He goes to reach for a key and stops, like he hesitates, turns around and looks at me and kind of gives this funny, like chuckle, but I couldn't tell if it was because he was drunk or if there was some other, sinister reasoning behind it. And and then he's like, "Oh, we haven't prepared that one yet." And I'm like, "Prepared? What do you mean by like you're out in the middle of nowhere? What does that mean to prepare a hotel motel room? I guess this was the kind that you walk in, your door is to the outside. So I guess it would be a motel, not a hotel." So anyways, he reached it and then he gives me a different key. And I go to my room and there were two TVs sitting on top of each other, of course. That was probably the least thing. I mean, I expected that. One was working, one wasn't, so they just set the other one on top of it. And then there's weird holes in the wall randomly at different places, which also probably expected. Like in the bathroom and in the shower and stuff. But that wasn't the problem. There were stains on the carpet. Again, in Kansas and this area in Midwest and stuff. I mean, this was Illinois, but I assume it might be the same. There a lot of hunters come through here, and I have literally had to stay at like motels that have a sign on the wall that says, "Please do not clean your game in the room." Meaning they would bring their whatever birds or turkeys or whatever they're hunting into the room and clean it there. So whether that's where the blood stains on the carpet came, and this was like 70s style green shag carpet. So that wasn't the disturbing part, right? So again, there's nobody else in the parking lot besides the El Camino and the weird camper parked at the end of the lot. The rest of the buildings look completely empty, no lights on, nothing anywhere. There is not another town for that matter for I don't probably like 30 miles. And so here I am. I wasn't gonna touch the sheets for that matter. I mean, this still had one of those vibrating beds that you like put the coins in and shit. I'm not No. So my dogs are just standing guard at the door, right? Because they already like they don't even want to they're very they were pacing. That's how bad that's how bad it was. And so oh, I forgot when I was at the front desk, I had asked the gentleman there if the gas station or if there was another gas station or anywhere nearby. And um he said, "No. Why? Do you need gas?" And I'm like, "No, I have plenty. Thank you." Just wanting to get a drink and, something to eat. He's like, "Oh, I have alcohol." I'm like, "No, no, no, no. No, thank you. No, thank you. I just need, maybe some potable water perhaps or something." But anyway, so he said everything was closed and that's, back in my room. And so there weren't e there wasn't a lock on the door. I mean, there was a lock, like like on the doorknob part, but it didn't have like a deadbolt. It didn't have anything. Somebody could have just kicked the door and bust down. For that matter, they probably could have kicked the wall and busted down. And so here I am. And I'm like, man, what am I going to do? I'm going to have to go out. I had from moving, and I had my vehicle. I had blankets and sheets and stuff in my own vehicle because I was moving. So I'm like, okay, maybe if I put my bedding on top of this, but like a sleeping bag and then my bedding and stuff, I might be able to get a little bit of sleep because it was a 20, it's like a 26, 27-hour drive um, from Buffalo. Oh, thank you. I don't know who you are because it says Facebook user. You have to click allow, I think, in StreamYard. I don't know how they changed it. Um, but anyway, so there I am, and there's a literally like a somebody pounding on the door. Scared the holy hell out of me. I tell you, my dogs went. They didn't even bark though. They're like, "Oh, we're gonna die. This is a horror movie," and so I go to the door. I go to the door, and this is one of those moments where I'm like, I don't have anywhere to go. So where would I go? Where would I go? Oh, hey, Jessica, thank you. Um, so I open the door, and there's the man from the front desk, and he holds up a six pack of beer, and he said, "Here, I brought you some drink." I'm like, uh well, you didn't have to do that. And second, I'm like, where'd you get it? He's like, oh, no, no, no problem. I have a whole closet. He said closet full, room full, something of stuff that people leave. And I'm like, all right, thanks. I shut the door. Because I wasn't gonna be rude and I wasn't gonna drink it. I mean, this stuff, it was like dusty and it had expired like 5 years ago, prior. So it, I'm sure people did leave. They probably left everything they brought behind because this place was scary as hell. So the entire night, I swear, there were like, and this wasn't, I'm not afraid of the unliving, the unalive. Um, bec- but this was like the living. We're doing these things. And when I say like a horror movie, I'm saying like I would see eyes and not just one pair, like multiple pairs through holes in the wall. And and again, granted, this was 2008. So we didn't have like the high-tech smartphones. We didn't have I don't think any of that came out, for a few years after. So I don't even know if I got service there. I mean, yeah, there was the little phone on the desk or whatever, but it wasn't, I wasn't going to rely on that. Somebody could cut the line. I've seen those movies too. But there were just like, there were eyes literally in my walls. And what's creepy when I say that right now, um, oh, there's a person. When I say that there like right as I'm saying that, one of the first movies I was going to bring up has it like popped up on my screen on the other side. Um, that's the cover of the movie, our eyes. And so needless to say, it was the worst night of my life. My dogs, they were growling every 5 seconds. There were knocks on the walls. There were I kept hearing like it was like a whimpering sound, and it wasn't an animal. It sounded maybe like a woman or a little girl. Scared to death. And I was by I didn't have anyone to call. We're in the middle of a storm and I'm in the middle of nowhere in a place that I don't know. I don't know my directions there. I didn't have GPS, nothing. Like um and there was a clown. There was a clown on the sign. So I always think about the creepy clown hotels, and and what reminded me of that was I changed, my banner. I dressed as a clown last year, so that kind of started this whole. that also sparks another story in the future that I'm going to get into about the clown demon. Um, that's another that could be an entire show by itself. But tonight, again, we're going to talk about movies that have been set or filmed in Kansas. And so I'm going to go way back to some of the older ones that people aren't as familiar with. Again, Wizard of Oz, everybody knows about. Um, but there's one called um, this was actually a comedy type horror flick, and this was in 1966. It was called The Ghost and Mr. Chicken. So The Ghost and Mr. Chicken, it starred Don Knotts. I don't know. I think he was from the Andy Griffith Show. Um, but he was a newspaper. Played a newspaper or like a journalist. Maybe did something for the newspaper. Um, and it was in a fictional town called Rachel City, Kansas, although it was still filmed somewhere here. And he lived at like a boarding house. He was aspiring to be a reporter for the paper, and nobody took him seriously. Everybody mocked him, you know. Um, and he reported on a murder near a supposed haunted mansion called the Simmons Mansion, and it that proved to be nothing more. It ended up being like a domestic violence situation where the guy knocked his wife out when he was drunk. And so all the other reporters ridicule him over his mistake, and he actually there were a lot of there was a murder suicide that happened at the mansion, and so he the legend was that there was a guy killed by his wife with a bladed instrument before he jumped off the building and killed himself, and from the organ loft. So this was back in the day when they had the big organs at the top of in theaters and stuff on the top level in the loft. And so um, he reports on this murder suicide that actually ended up being real, and it was about an organ that played itself. Um, and so he ran down like after this organ started playing music, there were scenes of pruning shears stabbed in a painting of the woman that supposedly made this man, leap to his death. And so with blood gushing from her neck. Well, that became an entire controversial thing in Kansas because that was in the original movie poster. And I believe there are only a few of those in existence. And they're said to be very valuable because um, they removed it in later publications from that poster. So if you have one of those and the Ghost and Mr. Chicken, it's very valuable. So that's the first one. That one's not extremely scary, but a lot of people do like Don Knotts. He was, a good actor. Um, the reason the movie was interesting because there are a lot of for people that don't know, um, one of the ladies he has a crush on um, from the newspaper. Her name was Alma, who ends up being held captive and stuff. And there's secret passages. There's um, there's things like that, but it makes me wonder. There's a town called Alma, which also has a crazy background. Um, and then you can go back to why it's named that. There's goddesses and things like that in history. But the next movie was called In Cold Blood. Now this one, I actually did a report on this when I was in college. Um, when I took a class about the psychology of serial killers. I'm sorry, I had to get a drink. So, um, this one was it was 1967. Um, it was a crime film, true crime, based on a true story, produced and directed by Richard Brooks. Sorry. Um, and it was based on Truman Capote's nonfiction book with the same name, In Cold Blood, and that's the book that I was talking about that has the uh, the eyes. You know, he has his eyes on the front of the book. So, um, it was shot in on location where Smith and Hickok's crimes occurred, at the Clutter home. They robbed and murdered four members of the family. It was this film was nominated for many awards, Academy Awards and such. But um, there were two ex-convicts, Perry Smith and Dick Hickok. Um, they met in rural Kansas in 1959. Um, the Clutter family, which so I forgot about this. Um, that I did a report on this until I started studying this in the last few weeks. Oh my goodness, excuse me. Yeah, see, throat chakra. That's crazy. I drive by a place called Clutter something Associates. So the name is relevant. Um, now I don't know how far that would have been. Um, but anyways, these two ex-convicts, they planned to rob the farm of a wealthy um, family man, you know, and they had been watching him. They had been staking out his house, things like that, where he kept large supplies of cash at his home in a safe. Now, anyone who was familiar with Kansas knows that that is not probably, well, back then especially, um, in the smaller towns, people used to do that all the time, um, for many reasons. There weren't a lot of larger banks, for one, but they also, I don't know, they just Kansans don't trust a lot of people, so there is that. Um, and so these criminals break into his house in the middle of the night. They're unable to find the safe, and they use he has a bunch of checks that he uses for personal um for his farm operations and his personal business and things like that. Um, so they they didn't want to have any witnesses to their robbery, and they killed the farm owner, the homeowner, Herbert, by slitting his throat, and they proceed to murder his wife, Bonnie, and their two teenage children, Nancy, 16, and Kenyon, 14, with a shotgun. Their bodies weren't discovered until the next day. Um, and the KBI, which is the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, is immediately launched into the crime, obviously. And um, it is said that there was a tip from Hickok's former cellmate at the prison that I'm assuming they of talk of, what they're going to do when they get out, things like that, because but that's interesting to me. Like, how did they know that Herbert existed while they're in prison? I- Is that something that they knew of him before? Is it someone they saw in the media? Is it just a wealthy person they saw? How did they know that? Um, and how did they research that while they were in prison? Um, and so, oh, hi, Brian. Oh, speaking of which, and I will post those links as well. Uh, I have, um, I was on Brian. which Brian's been on my show as well, and we talked about that. But I was on his show last weekend, and through the lens with Brian and Lex, and that what day was that? Was that would have been October 9th, I believe. It was Sunday, so I will post a link to that. Um, a lot of fun. I always go off on tangents talking about crazy stuff. Um, Anyways, they actually um they fled to Florida at the time. And they eventually crossed into Mexico. I assume closer to, the uh maybe Louisiana, or like coming over, because it was the Las Vegas. Um oh, they returned to Vegas. I was going to say, how did the Nevada Police Department end up with them? So they spent a few weeks in Mexico. They returned to Vegas. They were going to gamble, I assume. They were also using Herbert's checks, um, and obviously had a stolen car, violated their parole, things like that. And so the Las Vegas Police Department um, later found them, decided to interrogate them on the Clutter murders, and they both admitted to the bad checks. They admitted to, I'm not sure if they admitted to the stolen property or the stolen car. However, they denied knowing anything about the murders. So, um, which is interesting, and I'm sure the KBI, the KBI did claim that they had left behind a witness who was willing to testify against them in regards to the murder. So, when they were confronted with the evidence, as which I don't think the KBI had very much evidence, because they were still going off of the tip from the one of the convicts' ex cellmates. So all they had, they said they had a bloody footprint matching the boots that were worn by Smith. Um, and so things like this eventually led to the breakdown. Um, Hickok broke down and confessed not to the murders, but to witnessing the murders. So he blamed Smith for doing everything. Um, and so he said he was present when Smith carried out the murders. He begged for immunity from the death penalty. And so, and see, the KBI was smart about it though. They interrogated them separately, and so, um, after Smith learned that Hickok had confessed, he said that he did recount that it was in fact himself and not his partner, who wielded the knife, who pulled the trigger in all four killings, um, but did say that Hickok was there as an active accomplice. So they were both charged with first degree murder. They were found guilty on all accounts, and they were each sentenced to death by hanging. Now, after losing multiple appeals, both men were hung for their crimes, and there were only law enforcement officials. Well, there were media representatives in attendance as well. But that is interesting that I didn't even put two and two together. That I assume I have been led to places that these people might haunt before, because I see that name come up a lot, and I completely forgot that I do a report on that. Um, so that's, but there's a book. The book, as I remember, obviously is better than the movie, as they usually are, because you can get more detail in there. Um, but they're both. I had to watch that in college. It's Again, it's an older movie, 67. Um, but still an interesting story the way it works out. Um, and there's a house. It's filmed in it's actually in Garden City. So, um well, some of the scenes were filmed in Garden City, sorry. Holcomb, Kansas was the other location of the original event, including the Clutter's farm. Their house was the new family that owned it they were paid $15,000 in compensation to film the movie. The bus station in the movie was actually in Kansas City. Um, and then there were also some of the scenes shot in Kansas City as well. So the Kansas State Penitentiary actually denied um, any filming, which was interesting. So they weren't able to film the execution chambers and things like that. So those were replicated in Hollywood, obviously. Um, but the production crew purchased Smith and Hickok's uh, actual latrines from their cells. Now, wouldn't that be a part of history you'd want to own? So, seriously, that's ridiculous. All right, moving on. Hello, Raymond. Thank you for joining. Um, the next one, which I've actually studied a lot about because um, this came up last year, and actually, which is ironic again, um, it is the Carnival of Souls. Well, first of all, I'm gonna go to one that everybody's going to be familiar with. Um, and well, maybe, I don't know, should be familiar with it, is Superman. Although Superman is a fictional character, um, and I don't know that many, if any, parts of it were actually filmed in Kansas, but it was definitely set in Kansas. And there's been numerous obviously they've redone many renditions of Superman since the original. But going off the original, um his ship landed near a place called Smallville, which is actually, and it's said to be a fictional place. um However, if you're familiar with Kansas, you'll start to see a trend in these various movies that have um that have weird things happen, because that's normal. That is absolutely normal in the Midwest. I don't care. From Michigan all the way down, it doesn't matter. There is unexplainable things that happen here, and now all of you who aren't from here, you're going to start watching these movies and be like, huh. Maybe they do exist. Maybe these things do exist. Um, so, anyways, Superman, the plot, obviously, um, there's he was a young boy. I think he was 2 or 3, like supposed to be 2 or 3 in the movie, who was from another planet, and the Krypton, um, Jor-El of the Kryptonian High Council. They discover their planet's going to be destroyed when their supergiant sun explodes. And so he wants to save his son, who was an infant at the time. And so he sends him in a spaceship to Earth. And they say it's because his dense, this is quote, dense molecular structure will give him superhuman strength and other powers, which is interesting because how many times on my show, let's get back to that, I didn't know that that was quoted on this Superman thing, right? And how many times have I talked about why I started. I mean, I was always into sports and lifting weights and stuff before, and before I became a trainer and stuff. But it wasn't until after my first major abduction experience that I had remembered that I started lifting weights a lot, because what weighs or muscle is denser, right? Muscle weighs more than fat, obviously. It has more density. So, and I've said that before. I've said it is harder to take someone, due to the molecular structure and the density of your body. If you have more muscle, it's harder to take you through a wall, per se. Is that not correct? Right? So, that's the reason years ago I didn't even understand at the time how or why I was doing it. I just knew it was doing something and that it helped. And so, um, it's interesting that they say that in this movie, description, that that's why he has, superpowers or whatever. I don't have superpowers. I'm just saying this is why Superman does. And so, um, when he was 3 years old, and I assume the difference in age between being an infant to when he was 3 years old was in space travel, however many light years it took to get here or whatever. And so his ship landed near Smallville, Kansas at 3 years old. He's found by Jonathan and Martha Kent, and he lifted their truck. I remember that in the first one. They decide to adopt him and raise him. Um, they named him Clark after, it was Martha, his adopted mom's maiden name. Um, and they believe that he was sent to Earth for a reason, like a divine reason. So after his adopted dad died of a heart attack, um, Clark was 18 years old, and he heard a psychic calling, um, and discovered the glowing green crystal, um, from his spacecraft. That's all that remained of his, the ship that he crashed. And so then he's compelled to go to travel to the Arctic. He, constructs this fortress of solitude, um, and he becomes a reporter at an, there's a theme here, right? It's always the reporters at newspapers. Anyways, and then he kind of lives this. Everybody knows the story of Superman. Lives this double life, the caped wonder they called him back then. Um, and Lois, the woman at the newspaper who he was in love with, um, she ended up writing an article naming him Superman. So she's the one that gave him that name. Um, and so this criminal named Lex Luthor in the show, he finds out about the U.S. Army post and a nuclear missile test site. Um, he buys hundreds of acres of empty desert land and reprograms the two missiles to detonate in the San Andreas Fault. With his assistant, Otis, accidentally programming the second missile coordinates incorrectly. So, he knew all along that Superman could stop this plan. So Lex, um, he had recently discovered the meteorite, from Krypton, and knew that it was radioactive to Superman. And so, his little accomplice Otis and Eve Tesh, I don't know how to say that name. Tessmacher? I don't even remember it. Anyways, he sent his little accomplice to retrieve this and lure Superman to his underground lair. And so basically that reveals his entire plan, to cause everything west of the San Andreas Fault to sink into the Pacific Ocean. Um, which would make Luther's new West Coast, or Luther's desert land, the new West Coast in the United States. Luther then exposes him to the meteor piece's mineral kryptonite, which weakens Superman's ability greatly, and taunts him about the second missile, in which will detonate in Hackensack, New Jersey. Why is this relevant? Or why did I just stop there? And this must have been, extremely relevant. Because, okay, let's go back to the Georgia Guidestones. This is where my channeling gets in the way. This is why I can't watch movies, right? So, and I've been looking at this the last few days. If you read about the Georgia Guidestones, they tell of all of the places that will be safe um, in the future from natural disasters, from earthquakes, from falling off in the ocean, from tsunamis, from everything. And so the map of the Georgia, is specifically lists kind of what is going on now in the world. Um, it talks about the middle of the United States, right down the Missouri border. There's one of the major fault lines there being split. It talks about the majority of the southwestern part of California breaking off and going in the ocean. And it talks about the bottom, well, the portion of Florida basically that just got hit by a hurricane, as well as parts of Louisiana, a lot of the southern states, part of New York, New Jersey. So this is why this is ironic. And I looked at the list of episodes last night on because it popped up on my TV in the middle. This was 4 in the morning. It pops up on my TV. The old the old X Files. Now, if you go to the X Files and look at the chapter sequence when they first begin, you don't even have to watch the whole episodes. I watched a lot of them when I was younger, but just the um, look at the. I'm trying to block somebody's doing like a spam thing in the chat room. Anyways, look at the titles, and you'll see how many of those things have come true. Um, and those are all from the 90, 93, 94 era. So that's actually pretty scary. So this being relevant, I had never up until today, I didn't decide, I'm familiar with all the movies filmed here. I did research on them, the movies themselves, watch them, but I had not read about a lot of the official descriptions. And I believe there's always a reason we put a message out there. So Hackensack, New Jersey, supposed to be the other one. Um, Now, Luther's one of his little, minions, one of his little accomplices, mother lives in Hackensack. Um, but either way, he doesn't care. He leaves Superman to die. Um, and so knowing that Superman always keeps his word, this test mocker um, helps him help Superman on one condition that he stops the eastbound missile to save his mother. So after being freed, Superman, of course, stops that missile. Um, he diverts it back into outer space. Um, but the westbound one, he couldn't reach in time. So that ends in massive earthquakes, damages the Golden Gate Bridge, breaches the Hoover Dam, um, and he stops it by sealing the fault line. So while he's busy saving everyone, um, Lewis is, of course, he's got to go save his girl, Lewis. Um, they always have the most dramatic. I think her car fell in like one of the fault lines or something. Um, but I'm not going to give you the ending to that one. Um, but there's a lot of talk about manipulating human history, um, and that he's actually there for a reason. Um, and so he figures out a way to use time travel and things like that, but there's mass destruction by all these natural disasters as well, the earthquakes, the floods, everything. Um, so he I don't know how many Supermans came out after that. Um, but most people are familiar with the concept of Superman by now. There's even the Superman, the girl. There's like Superwoman and all of those now. Oh, thank you, Teresa. I'm sorry, I got stuck on Superman here um, for a minute. But that's another very well known one. That was the first one was in 1978, I believe. Um, creepy movie. I remember. I don't know why our parents let us watch these um, back in the 80s and such, but this one was actually one of it's still to this day a creepy movie, and I didn't remember that because I didn't live in Kansas at that time in the 80s, so I didn't remember that this one was filmed here, but it's called The Attic. So if any of you have seen these movies and would like and know anything about them, please comment. Um, I know that oftentimes when you know that a movie has been filmed in your area, like it makes it more well, especially if it's been based on a true story. But if it's been if just a scary movie you've seen has been filmed where you live, it makes it even scary. Like it makes it more real. So um gosh, this one. So this one was back in 1980. Um there were quite a few things that happened in that line of events, I guess, that should be mentioned. 1980 was a pivotal year for many, many reasons, aside from like the new technology in these movies and stuff. But in April of that year, Alfred Hitchcock died, which Hitchcock. Did I say Hickok? That was the murder from the from the In Cold Blood. Anyways, Alfred Hitchcock. He was the master of suspense. He died that year at the age of 80. But of course, everyone knows The Empire Strikes Back was released that year. Just, I know, I'm going to get hate comments, hate mail. I've never actually, well, I mean, I probably saw it when I was like 6 or 7. I've never seen Star Wars. Never seen it. I remember my parents watching Star Trek, but I've never seen that either. I I know, I know, I know. I'm one of those. I'm one of those. Um, yeah, I've literally never seen that. I think my son made me watch uh The Mandalorian. I know I'm butchering this, and you're all gonna hate me, but no, I've never seen those. Um, there were other weird. Oh, Caddyshack came out that year. That's not obviously not not a horror film, but there were a lot of things happened in Hollywood that year with the advancements, I guess I should say, in the film world. Back to gosh, I have so many. I'm like um my ADHD and I see a squirrel. Um back to the attic. All right. So I lost it. Huh. I feel like I'm supposed to talk about the other one first though. So that's weird. because I was there was a film called The Gypsy Moths. Um, and I'm wondering why I was just directed to look back at that because obviously that movie was I mean, it was totally different than what you think it is. It was a story, it was a drama based on skydivers. Um, because they had a different lifestyle than the small town Midwesterners. So the movie is literally about their how they lived their life and how the people around them lived a different life. But they were called the gypsy moths because when they would jump out of the plane, they looked like they had wings, which is interesting because what have we been talking about lately? The Mothman. Where has that always been present? It's been present many times aside from the East Coast, from the down through the so from like outside the Chicago area, Illinois, um, and south. And it's been spotted everywhere in Kansas City, Topeka, you name it, all the way Oklahoma. Um, but I find it interesting that I was just ooh, and now I got the chills. This all leads back to there being a dead bat outside my truck, uh, like 2 weeks ago. Yes, before all the UFOs, came over Kansas and all hell, all chaos broke out in Topeka. I'm actually going to be talking about that with Joe Montaldo um, next week on next week's show because there were a series of events um, preceding that. The picture I took a picture of some sort of craft in the sky that was disguised as um, there's that new app I use that says I think it says boat, which, I would think a boat is the same thing as a ship, but that's what my phone viewfinder called it. But anyways, um, gypsy moths. So that's interesting. I don't know why that was called to my attention, but it was. So that might be one to pay attention to. Um, what was the other? Some of these aren't horrors. Not all of them that they were showing me. The Attic was. The Attic was a very scary movie. Um, it was talking about a librarian in Wichita, Kansas, who is a depressed alcoholic, and she became that way because her previous fiance, disappeared the day before their wedding. But it has been 19 years, and she um, ended up having to take care of her abusive father, who's now confined to a wheelchair. So after she suffered many nervous breakdowns, um, and she even started a fire in the library. So this lady went off her rocker. You know, she resigned from her position, um, and when she was training the lady that was going to replace her after the fire, she did attempt to take her life, and she survived it. And so all of these things lead to her having fantasies about taking revenge against her dad and going so far as murdering him. Well, one night, she goes to this movie theater and she meets a man who was a sailor. And after the movie, um, they returned to his hotel or something, and they ended up spending a lot of time together. Um, they go to a pet store, and she expresses her affection for this chimpanzee of all things in a pet store window. Um, and this sailor, who she's only known, granted, for like 2 days or something, ends up purchasing it for her as a gift. Um, she she brings the chimpanzee home, right? And her dad absolutely doesn't want it there. she names the chimpanzee Dickie, and um, she 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 doesn't want to. She stays in Kansas. Her friend, um, obviously, um, and the man she just met, moved to California. Um, even though she hates her life there, and so when her friend invites her to have dinner at her mother's house, Mrs. Perkins chastises um, the brothers of her friend because they broke one of her figurines, right? And so all of a sudden now, her chimpanzee goes missing after this like dinner party, and her father claims it ran away. Well, the next morning, she buys a plane ticket to fly to Los Angeles, right? For Emily, her friend. And um and leaves it for her at the library with a note. And she decides to go to the airport also. Um to call Louise and thank her for that. And so Louise brings her father to the park, a local park, and while rolling him up the hill, the wheelchair tips over and he falls out. Now, this is her abusive father who she despises, you know. And so she realizes that he automatically picks himself up and revealing obviously that he's not disabled. Um and the whole time that she's been forced to take care of him, it was just a ploy to keep her stuck there in Kansas, you know. And so in her she lost it in a fit of rage. She pushes him down the hill. He ended up dying. He smashed his head on a rock. And when she goes to get her stuff from his house, you know, when she's trying to find his hidden money and things like that to leave, um, when she's going to run away, she comes across a key to their attic, the home's attic, which has long been locked and boarded. And so using the key, she goes in the attic and accidentally locks herself inside. Then she finds Dickie's body, the chimpanzee, along with along with I'm not going to tell you who else was in the attic because you're going to have to watch it. That's a messed up movie. There were some that reminds me of Flowers in the Attic. That wasn't filmed in Kansas, but that's another one that's highly disturbing about the kids locked in the attic. Um, this is also relevant because I rent my house. I have an attic that's locked that I've never, there's an entire section of my upstairs I've never seen, never been in. I don't even know what's up there. I know there's weird windows. Um, but that's disturbing now. I'm going to have nightmares. Thank you. Thank you all. This is this is for your this is for your benefit. Now I'm going to have to follow up with you know, my attic, my attic dreams. Um, so you can find like there people do lists of like dysfunctional family movies. Just it's highly disturbing. I'm only doing this because this is you too, Trace. That you have an attic that's locked that you don't know what's up there. It's interesting how many people. So I have a story about that too, actually, which that story might be more interesting than my next movie. But uh, when it actually leads into my next movie. When I went to college in KU, that's Lawrence, Kansas. I actually I lived in a townhouse with a roommate, and my roommate went home on winter break, and there was, you know, I stayed there to work and to study and stuff. I was taking classes over the winter semester, and I would be in my room on my computer, you know, like I am now, basically. But there was I had my desk to a wall and there's a door behind me. And we had both of our rooms upstairs, and then there was a spare bedroom up there, which we didn't have any, we were poor college students, like we were freshmen. We didn't have any furniture in that spare room. We didn't have anything. We never even went in there for that matter because we didn't have anything to put in there. There was just no reason for it. And so we kept the door closed. But I had this little dog, who he was a little Maltese, and he acted, I don't know, he acted so weird around. Like he would go up to the door and like sniff underneath of it and just run away. Um, and then things started happening at my townhome because I got off work really late. I worked until like 11 at night. Um, because it was my, it was my after school job. And so I would get home from work, and he, my little dog, wanted to preferred to stay in his kennel when I was gone. He weighed like 3 pounds, so I assume he felt safer. But I would get home, nobody there, and the thermostat would be set to like 90 degrees, you know. So me having been around spirits and stuff my entire life, I automatically thought that maybe it was a ghost or something that was changing the thermostat because things like that kept happening. And then there would be like doors slamming and stuff. Well, I would hear when I would be at my computer studying, I would hear, if it's dead silent, you can hear like, even though I had carpet, you can sense someone walking like on the carpet behind you. That just creeped me out because right before that, I saw like, anyways, and so you can hear somebody walking. If it's really silent, you can sense a presence and stuff. It's with any spirits. But this was like a human, like a person, like a human presence, a lot living presence, I should say. And so finally after Christmas break. Oh, no, so I ended up going to this was back when we wrote checks for things, back in those days. And I was at some store and I wrote a check and the man there says, "Oh, that's where I used to live." I don't know if he meant like the same place or the same, as apartments or townhomes or whatever. So um he said the old manager used to drill holes in the walls and peep on female tenants. And I'm like, and he's like, "See you around." I was like, "What the-" Here I am, first year of college, like there's some creepy dude that has my address and all my information on a check, and just said, "See you around." So creepy. But anyways, after my roommate came back, when Christmas break was over, it was like a Saturday morning or something. We're both asleep, obviously. Um, I hear somebody run down the stairs and out the front door. And I'm like, holy hell. And so I go get my roommate. The guest bedroom door is open. We both come out of our rooms and we'd gone we well, he had gone up to the attic before when we first moved in. There was nothing up there. Um and and so after this happened, there were like candles and footprints and I don't know, blankets, all kinds of stuff that up there. So somebody had been living in my attic. Somebody had been living in my attic this entire time, like all that time that I thought somebody was in the house. Somebody had been living in my attic. And now that I say this, I'm thinking about the attic I have now. Holy shit. How creepy is that? Anyways, but that goes to show like how often do we not know what what's around us, and it goes the same, it's the same with spirits, and we talk about that all the time. Like you don't know who lived in the house before you bought it or you rented it or whatever. You don't know the history. I mean, some of you look up the history of it, but most people, most investigations I've gone to, most spiritual things I've looked into, they don't even bother looking into the history of the house past like the inspections and when it was built and all of those things, they don't care who lived there. They don't care what's happened there. But that's the first thing I do because I want to know what's going to haunt me. I want to know what I'm getting myself into, because a lot of those times we're drawn to places. You'll hear numerous people on these networks talk about how they're stuck in a place or in a house or a location or whatever. They feel like they can't leave because they were drawn there. And then once they got there, they were stuck. That happens a lot. There are houses that will call you to it. Like that's a thing, and then people get stuck at that part because they feel and their lives just go downhill. And um after discussing this with I was talking to my niece about it, about the person living in my attic, because the same thing happened at two other houses I lived in. And I even talked about this one, having the weird door, and it's happened everywhere I've lived. And she's like, you know what? That happened to me too. There was somebody I could have sworn there was like a secret door and somebody was living in our attic. And then Trey said, you said me too, and I assume that was in reference to the attic thing. That you had a attic that you hadn't been in or know anything about. So comment if that's also happened to you, because that's an interesting thing. That means that either a because all of that is like, seriously, it's you'll read stories like it's like CIA style stuff. They'll do that to for a lot of reasons to people, um for like surveillance reasons. And so that's creepy. If that's happening, because aside from spirits living there, this is like real people, you know. Um it's definitely, I don't think, and I've never got that feeling that it was like a squatter, and for those of you, that's like a slang term for um just someone who's homeless or a bum or something that um just needs a place to stay. I've never gotten that. Like, most of the time they wouldn't risk, they don't want to deal with having to work around someone actually all still living in a place. They're more likely to go to abandoned buildings and such. But this is houses that are lived in, I'm talking about. And I don't know how many times I could tell you that has happened in my own life. One time in New York, though, um, the people that lived next door in the townhome, but we shared like their side was supposed to be locked. It was like a double door that went to the attic. Well, the attic was my room, and craziest experience. Like, some really nice people lived there before them, and right after they moved, these people never. I never saw them come out during the daylight, which isn't weird. Some people, whatever, sleep during the day because they have night jobs or something. But they all wore the same. It was like a cult. It was like living next to a cult. Um, they just wore these dark hooded, like, robe looking things all the time. They would be standing at, we shared a back porch, and I had a giant, like, window, glass window on my back door, and they would just be standing there looking at me through it, like, first thing in the morning and stuff. This happened all the time. Like, I can't tell you how many times this happened. That house was so haunted. My friends stopped coming there. Things would be thrown across the room. My kids were terrified. Terrified. I mean, like, this was when they were young, young, young. And there were other things like my son's gerbil was outside of its cage literally every day. It had a metal escape proof. Like, there was no way, no way, no way. And it would always end up right where I was, whether it be like, this was a huge house too. I mean, I could be really, really far away, like 3 stories down, and all of a sudden the gerbil would be at my feet. So it was like taunting us, like messing with us. And then that's the house that had 9 stabbings throughout history, by the way. So that was a very uh I can't even um the things that happen there are unreal. I don't know how I lived there for almost a year. Um but I ended up moving right across the street just to get away from it. Um and which comes back to the damn clown, I tell you. And clowns are you know, a lot of people are scared of clowns because um well, clowns are scary, they have a smiley face all the time. I don't trust anybody who smiles all the time. Um, but when I moved across the street, I was all excited. I was on the phone with my mom, I'm like telling her about my new house. And this was a big house too. New York houses are enormous, like the old style, because they were meant for like multi-families. And so I was telling her about my new house, literally on the phone with her. And I go down to the basement for the first time because it's scary and big and I didn't want to be, I'm still, this was like, I don't know, I was probably like 35. And so I go to the basement and I said, well, after all I've been through, at least now all that I'm afraid of is clowns. I swear to you, what happened then, out of the ceiling, like, I mean, I know in people's basements back then, like they stuff weird stuff, just as storage, like in the slats in the ceiling and stuff. Like I get that. No, out of the ceiling, this retro, like vintage clown, I don't know, poster picture thing falls out of the ceiling. Not even kidding. Falls right at my feet as I'm on the phone with my mom. And I'm like, our clowns. Like I hadn't even gotten it out of my mouth yet. Um, which is interesting that that I dressed as a clown last year because um that's when um a lot of these things start coming back about this entity. Um, and that house actually, that one, it wasn't near like the other one. It wasn't near as haunted, but that was the first thing that was seriously creepy. Um, I had never at that point, I had never had anything like that happen. Like as far as soon as I would say it, it would happen. And things like that happen to me now all the time. Um, but back then it was weird, and and it was a few years later that would have been 4 years ago now. Um, my daughter was sleeping with me because she was afraid of the dark. She was probably, I don't know, she's probably like 4 or 5 at the time. I had a dream about a clown being at my front door knocking, saying bang bang, and um, like in a weird bozo looking, and that's all he said when you bust through the front door. Well, I was asleep, mind you, having this dream. It wasn't like one of my waking visions. This was actually a dream in my sleep. My daughter's waking me up at the same time. She's, pushing my, she's like, Mommy, Mommy. And she says, something, there's someone's at the front door. They just said bang bang. I'm gonna go see who it is. Like it was calling to her. This was like 3 or 4 in the morning to come to the front door. And I was like, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. It would be one thing if her and I had the same dream because that happens a lot because you transfer the energy. We didn't just have the same dream. She was awake and heard it and thought it was real. And so then I was like, okay, this is dangerous. Like that's really dangerous. Um, so there's something physical, something physical energy or a person who has manifested and created that and is trying to lure my daughter. It was scary because all of a sudden throughout the years, all of these things, the clown hotel, the the picture dropping out of the ceiling, and now someone being in a front door. Um, they it was all too. So last year, it was when I went to Oh my gosh. There's this AI. They've got new AI hacker things for chat rooms. Um, yeah, so it was last year. I dressed as a clown, and when I was at the Sally House, um, I wonder if I can pull up a picture. This is terrifying. Oh my gosh. Um, let me show you all. It is, I'm not even going to say the name. I'm just going to, I mean, I can maybe, I don't know. Picture freaks me out now though. Um, it's a clown demon, but it makes a lot of sense. Like these things can, okay, that's scary. That's terrifying. Okay. So this is called the Book of Asmodeus, right? Wow. Okay. So also, let me tell you, let me this is crazy, y'all. This is crazy. You're gonna look at this and you're gonna be like, okay, that's like every episode of Trisha's show, and I've never shared this. So, um, let me share my screen on this so you all can see. Oh my God, I've had this theory for a while now. Let me bring this up. Share share screen. Reason. I've never clicked on this website ever. Um, uh-oh. Okay. I want to share Chrome. I lost everyone there for a second. Okay. So here it is. Here is the Book of Asmodeus site, right? It's an interactive site and game, actually. This is terrifying, and I'll tell you why. So, all I've ever seen, I've never seen this part. I've seen the picture. This picture, I don't know if you can see my mouse. This picture right up in the corner, it looks like a creepy clown demon. So, this basically says survive and write your own story. Interactive, physical, augmented reality, horror book, and game. It's a handmade book with 126 pages and polymer clay cover. Write your own adventure with your own portrait. Summon demons from the pages and defeat them, but be careful, the game is very difficult. And, and, uh-oh, it's double and. The demons come to life in your room. Good luck, my old friend. Oh my God. So the archetypes, there's the classics are the jock, the final girl, the fool, the nerd, the cheerleader. The choice will determine the type of puzzles that are presented to you. And so here's like a wolf, what is that? With like a joke jester thing above it. That looks like a deer, like a stag, a buck with wings and a halo above it. You have like, I think that's an owl with a handprint and glasses, maybe. And then you've got this octopus thing and it says, "Who are you?" Um, and there's like some werewolf looking thing. So, and this has been, I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with this because it says it's been on Forbes and MTV. And Game Star, Medium, all these things. I feel like I'm the last person to figure out to see this, like, ever. But here's the crazy thing, and it says it's from Hungary, right? Like, I mean, I assume the country. And so, let me get back to so what's crazy about that I've been wanting to talk to a few different authors about, and as well as paranormal investigators, when we discuss, when we bring up historical crimes, when we bring up historical events, locations, wars, when we reenact these things, when we talk about them, when we give energy to them, are we bringing them back to life? And second of all of these things throughout history, every cryptid, every creature that anyone who has ever imagined, is the energy and the thought process of them doing so. The very act of putting an idea, a thought into the universe. That means it already has momentum. It is already written in the book of this world and in your existence. If you have thought it, it's already in action out there. There's nothing that can ever dissipate that energy. So, are we, by writing these fictional stories of monsters, and this is why I say it's dangerous to, I mean, escapism's great, to get lost in a fantasy world. That's what gamers do, right? I personally, I don't play games, nothing against it. I never got into that. Um because I had a hard enough time throughout life determining, my reality was crazy anyways. So um it probably would have made it more difficult to determine what was real and what wasn't, um by playing different reality games. But are these games, and are these are this literature and these, because remember, I did the book, The Most Dangerous Books, a few weeks ago also. Are those things actually creating all of these monsters and all of these things in our world? But, if that's so, and if you create your own world every day by writing your whatever script you're living in, whatever story you have. See, that never made sense to me because there's so many things that I've seen that I've never in my wildest dreams would have thought about or witnessed, or maybe I did. Maybe it's something that was from my dreams that I didn't even realize my mind had conjured up, quite literally. um so that's interesting to consider. But the fact that there's an actual website that does this, that is based on everything I have said about that, is absolutely terrifying. Terrifying. Like the fact that you can create demons, with the intent of bringing them to life in an interactive game. Although maybe, I mean, would that help you defeat them? I don't know. But is it actually happening in real life, like in people's reality? In this matrix. Um, that's crazy. Um, Especially since the other one that I wanted to talk about being in Lawrence was called The Carnival of Souls, which wasn't a very well known movie. But I mean, it's a cult classic, and it was filmed in Lawrence, and it's really, really eerie, actually. Um, and clowns go with carnivals, right? Go with the circus carnival. Um, so right when all of that happened, um, last year when I was seeing that, there was a giant I think it was called Carnival, that came through town here, and it was a giant circus, and I was like, I'm done. I'm done. I can't. cannot. And then I learned of the movie being, like 30 miles away from me, and that's even scarier. So there's definitely something going on with all of these, but let me know in the comments. I should do a poll about that and see how many people have either written something that has come to life. Here we are in like the never ending story type thing. Or what other movie? Deadpool did that, I think, didn't they? Um, has either written something or drawn a picture that you later saw in real life. And tell me what theory you have. Do you think that since timing is fluid, that's something you had already witnessed, so you knew what to draw or write about? Or do you think that whatever you wrote about or draw came to life? So ponder on that. Um, it's already 10 o'clock, y'all. I just rambled on for almost 2 hours. Actually, it's like an hour and a half. But again, next week, Joe Montaldo and I will be discussing a lot of these theories, actually. And so I will have him on. Um, and I'm going. I don't know. I have mixed feelings about this whole website. So let me know if you test it. I'm really worried if you do. Don't put me in your book if you do in that case. Um, oh my God, now everybody's gonna be like, I was watching the or listening to the missing piece. No, don't do that. Don't do that. I will rewrite it. Um, but let me know if you've ever tried it, because I don't know, maybe I'm not dissing their website. That's just scary as hell to me. So let me know if you've tried it. Let me know your experiences. Again, thank you for watching. Thank you for all of your support. Please go like and subscribe to my group page. That's where you'll get all my updates on the missing piece with Trish Mo Facebook group. But also I'm determined, like which I get everybody subscribes to the UPRN page, and that's fine too. But I'm going to start doing more updating, I guess I should say, to my YouTube page as well. So I only have like 16 subscribers now because I really haven't ever done anything with it. Um, and then I also am starting shows on TikTok as well as YouTube for Teamo Trishmo, which is Amo Trishmo. So that's the with love one. Anyways, have a great evening, everyone. Be safe out there. I hope these storms that are coming don't cause too much chaos and destruction. Um, but I think we can all weather them now. We've been through a few years of chaos and crazy stuff. So I look forward to next week's show. And good night, everyone. Thank you for watching.